Hello, folks, and welcome back to another episode of CamBro Conversations. And today, our guest is Mr. Andy Ramage. Andy is somebody that I heard on a podcast back in November last year, and I thought his message was such that I couldn't think of anyone better to get on the podcast and speak around a topic that many of us will maybe have an initial visceral reaction to when you talk about being alcohol-free or our relationships with alcohol. And Andy put it in such a way that I'm excited to have a more nuanced, longer form conversation than you can get from a short Instagram post or a short Instagram story. With that in mind, Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Well, as you know, I love this subject and I think it's a brilliant thing that you're doing. We need more people like you out there giving it some. And I've been thrilled to sort of see all your stuff on Instagram and whatnot. You're teaching me a few things, I'll tell you that much.
Well, that's certainly a good compliment to start. It's always good to get the host on side early, Andy. I like that.
Yeah, good man.
So can you give us a little bit of your background, Andy? Because, I mean, you've got such a relatable story to many of us that listen to the podcast who work in the corporate world, want to better themselves. And then there's a lot of people who listen to the podcast that are in the fitness space that will probably have experienced some of the kickback on their experience with not drinking as much as society might deem that we should.
Yeah, so I guess the whistle stop tour is 16. I left school to become a professional footballer, follow the dream, as it were. So I signed with a club called Leyton Orient, was a youth team player there, young pro there. Didn't quite make it all the way through the ranks. Ended up at Gillingham FC, where I became, fully fledged member of the first team. And just when my career was really starting to take off in many ways, there was a change around and I got injured, unfortunately, but it was one of those really silly injuries. I basically tore my cartilage, which in today's world is probably like a 10-day out. I stupidly, as a sort of 19, 20-year-old, didn't want anyone to know. I knew my knee was struggling, but I was just starting to break into the first team. I was just starting to play really well. So I just kept playing. And stupidly, I played basically a whole season with a torn cartilage. And by the time I got operated on, my career was finished, unfortunately. So sort of 21, 22, I was done for in terms of football. But then I went traveling around the world with my now wife. I spent a lot of time in Ireland, where my wife's from. And I ended up back in London about age 26, 27. I worked in IT for a few years and basically just enjoyed myself. To be fair, I just traveled and parties and had a good old time, and ended up back in the world of oil broking, the guys with the bright jackets in the trading pits. And I just found this thing that was similar to sport for me. It was fast paced, it was electric, dynamic, and I excelled at it really quickly because I think my learning through football and that background just gave me this set of skills, this like really thick skin. And I think that ability to deal with pressure that worked perfectly in that environment. And sort of fast forward, things went incredibly well. 10 years later, sort of mid-30s, I guess I'd sort of made it by that traditional yardstick that too many of us get sucked into of, monetary certain level of income or certain career advancement, only to realize, I feel a bit like 5 out of 10. Like what? Like how does that happen? Do you know what I mean? When you've been following a dream, and I think like many of your listeners, like and definitely like yourself, we are incredibly good at working hard. Most people are unbelievably good at working hard, right? If you set us out on a mission, we'll go out and we'll graft and we'll go for it. And that's what I did. I spent 10 years grafting to get to this place or this level of success in terms of income, only to reach there and go, this feels a bit shit. Actually, I'm like 5 out of 10 in terms of my happiness and my vibrancy. I was overweight at that stage, 3 stone heavier than where I am now, incredibly unfit, incredibly unhealthy. All of my relationships were strained. I was barely at home, all of the obvious trappings that we all fall into. And I just sort of went, what am I doing? Like, what is this for? Why am I doing this? And in that moment of reflection, I actually looked at those people more successful than me by that traditional yardstick, i.e. those people that made even more money. And I just saw more of the same. I saw broken bodies, broken minds, broken homes. I was like, what are we doing? This doesn't make any sense. What is the point? You can keep your money. I don't care about that anymore. And it was a real big, epiphany over time for me is to go, no, that's not what I want. You know, I want to be fit and healthy and energized. I want, you know, most importantly to me, my relationships to be on point with my wife and my kids. So I'm just not playing that conventional game. I'm just not following that well-worn path, because I think it leads to more destruction than it ever gives in terms of reward. And that just set me on this sort of adventure in many ways, where I ended up then leaving that job to set up a new firm, to come back into that industry and do things completely differently from an angle of like vibrancy and energy and health, which is unheard of in the broking industry. I traveled all over the world, trained with the best of the best, went back, did a degree, did a master's degree in positive psychology, coaching psychology, trained with the likes of Rich Roll, some of the greatest thought leaders, big thinkers on the planet, went back into broking to set up this new business. And part of that process, that I was going to not drink. But the funny thing about not drinking, I know I've been talking a lot already, was that it was the last thing that I ever questioned. Like, here I was, right? I'd literally just traveled the world training with all of the best people. Not one person ever mentioned alcohol. No one mentioned it. So I went back into that environment, you know, and I was convinced I was going to meditate. I was even going to eat salad and stuff, right? I was all over it. And then within minutes, I was back into those old routines of taking clients out, wining and dining. And guess what? I didn't meditate. I didn't eat salad. All of those things that, you know, all of this wonderful learning that I just brought with me to the table to set up this new career and this new way of life just disappeared. There was no consistency. And why wasn't I consistent? Because of alcohol. It was the gigantic elephant in the room. And actually, it really started to build up this momentum in my mind. Oh, maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's the key to all of the other initiatives I'm trying to implement in my life. Maybe if I take alcohol out, I'll get consistent and whatnot. And that, to sort of wrap that first part of the picture up, was the genesis for me going on this little alcohol-free adventure, which I'm still on today. And that's led to all these other wonderful things in my life.
Yeah, it's an incredible background you have. And I think for starters, you achieved this success in the corporate space, which many of the listeners, including myself, want to achieve. By mid-30s, we want to hit certain financial numbers. We want to own certain things, certain metrics. But actually, your happiness wasn't fulfilled. And that's a huge point to make to everyone listening, that ultimately you've got to have a lot of other things going on besides just the finances. And you spoke about relationships there, them all being strained due to the lifestyle that you were leading, and the stress that you were putting on your body from being overweight, unhealthy, maybe underslept, all these different factors that were adding up to happiness not being fulfilled, despite this kind of goal that you held so highly in terms of maybe a certain monetary figure or a certain level of status within the broking world, that didn't tick that for you. And then you invest all this time and money into going around the world and training and becoming this more maybe actualized person when it comes to setting up your own firm and having the right culture. But like you said, and I love the phrase elephant in the room, it was sitting there in the corner, but it was much bigger than we thought and much more impactful than we thought, because it was actually the fact that alcohol was taking maybe time and whatever else away from you in order for you to actually implement these things in the best possible way for you and your new team.
Yeah, exactly. So just to jump in there, because there's loads around that, and I think it's really important for the type of people that are probably listening to the podcast. What's really exciting about all of this, and the reason that I sort of went back and did my degree, bearing in mind I left school at 16, so I went back and did a degree part-time, all whilst working, did a master's degree also part-time whilst working, because I wanted to get into the science. I wanted to understand how this well-being thing was working, because I started to stumble into some science called positive psychology, which is brilliant, which is basically the psychology behind well-being. And I kept seeing all this research that actually we've got it the wrong way around. There's an assumption that if we work incredibly hard and we achieve some stuff, then ta-da, we'll become happy. That's just not the case, right? I experienced that like firsthand myself. And actually, if you look at the science, it's the other way around. When you get energized and vibrant, the chances of you achieving traditional success are so much higher, because you've got that foundation of happiness or well-being, for want of a better word. So actually, for any of the younger people out there listening that are all over this, right, that are on it, they're going to work their socks off, a bit like I did, a bit like you're doing, right? The key to all of this is to optimize your well-being first, and the chances of you then achieving that traditional success of monetary value or career progression is much higher. It's in the research. Not only is it in the research, That's the way to do it. Why settle for anything less? Why settle for anything less that you not being completely energized, happy, vibrant, loving life, and smashing it out the park and having nice things? That's what life's about. Too many people get it the wrong way around. They leapfrog that bit in the middle. They just work really hard to achieve some stuff and they miss out on the happiness bit. Don't let that happen. Is a key message. And then back to the alcohol thing, just to get it out on the table. My relationship with alcohol, I described it as a middle lane drinker. And this is really important because when anyone talks about alcohol, there's a temptation to slip into that mindset of thinking, oh, he must have had a problem. He was one of those type of people. I didn't. Simple as that. And that's a really important part of my message, because then you can't run away from it. You can't listen to this and go, oh, I'm going to put him in a box. I wasn't in a box. I was just like you. I was just like everyone listening to this podcast. I was a middle lane drinker who would drink sometimes averagely, sometimes heavily, sometimes not at all, sometimes moderately, which is basically everyone on the planet. That's where I was. But in getting into that mindset of, right, I want to optimize everything in my life. What are the things that are holding me back? I weighed it up and said, actually, alcohol's holding me back. And I think people don't realize to the extent that it holds them back, because as I touched on earlier, it destroys that consistency. You need consistency to be the best. If you want to be the best at what you want to do, you need consistency. You need to show up every day in the office, right? And what I found is, look around the office, right? Do the experiment yourself. If you work in the city, look around your office on a Friday morning. Tell me if everyone in that office is optimized and they're all over it like a rash. They are not. I built that business, a broken business, on lunchtimes and Fridays because I knew the competition would be boozing it up at lunchtime and so hungover on a Friday they couldn't even speak, right? So I just got my team together and went, right, we were a small firm up against your Tullets, your Prebonds, the billion-dollar firms. And I was like, all we're going to do is be absolutely on our A game at lunchtimes and Fridays when everyone else is snoozing. We built a business. We are now the number one firm against all the odds in the crude space because of that, right? Optimizing not only our lives, but also thinking cleverly and seeing where there's weak spots in other people. And guess where those weak spots are? They're all based around alcohol.
That's incredible, isn't it? Because it's an uncomfortable truth. And to address your first point around middle lane drinking, I think that's why the conversations that we've had on Instagram DMs and the podcast that I've listened to you on previously are so impactful, because rather than speaking to people who genuinely have a clear issue with alcohol and should never ever touch it, you're speaking to those people that, like you say, they drink moderately. Maybe they go out on the weekends with their friends and binge drink. Maybe they have a couple of glasses of wine on an evening or a couple of beers to unwind, but they're not somebody that has a significant, terrible problem with alcohol, but they may have a smaller problem with alcohol, which is preventing them from reaching this level of peak performance which we've been speaking about, and you managed to drive from your team based on the fact that other people were sleeping at the right times when you were able to capitalize and take advantage. And that's a fantastic anecdotal example of how sometimes abstaining from something can open you up to massive opportunities.
Yeah, and also I think it gives you loads of courage, right? Because change is really difficult, especially a change such as not drinking. Because the truth is, and it's still the truth for me, I think everyone I know and love still drinks. That's just the way it is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
80% of the adult population drink. So your heroes in your business world probably drink, right? So it's really difficult to, like, from a psychological standpoint, to go against the grain, right? Is to literally turn around and walk the completely different direction to everyone else. I mean, you take my industry in broking, everyone drink is part of the culture of it, right? So to go, well, actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going over here, felt like to most people like madness. Most people said your business is going to suffer. How can you possibly be a broker and not drink? I mean, what a load of rubbish. And I've demonstrated that firsthand, because ultimately people want the service, right? And they want people to show up and be professional and be on it all the time. And that's what not drinking gave me, the opportunity to do that and to bang the drum and to get everyone like hyped up and on it every day. That's worth its weight in gold. But bigger and better than that is the fact that once you make a change like that once, it tees up all the following transformations. So if you remember back to my story, like I told you there, I was incredibly overweight, incredibly unfit, incredibly unhealthy. Relationships were strained. Once I started to deal with the elephant in the room, which was the alcohol thing, I got that consistency back. Guess what? I started to show up and train every day consistently. I started to eat consistently because I wasn't throwing in like a lot of stodge, McMuffins on a Wednesday morning because I felt absolutely horrific. Right?
Try
How
and
many
settle
times
the
have you done?
stomach.
Yeah, how many times have you done that? I mean, I could tell you the shape of our office by how many McDonald's McMuffins showed up of a morning. If there was a lot of them, I knew it was going to be a really tough day, put it that way. Right, but that's the stuff, that's the traps that we fall into. So you remove that, suddenly you're eating really well. Suddenly you're moving your body really well. Suddenly you've got your brightness back in your life. You've got your energy back. You've got your time back, your mojo back. Guess what? Amazing things start to happen. You optimize your body, right? You feel even better again, right? Your food intake starts to change. Like, for example, I made that big change around alcohol. So I was probably the first person in my industry that proactively said, I'm not drinking. There were lots of people in that industry who got told to never drink again through the classic reasons and classic routes. I was the first one proactively said, no, not doing it. Why would I do that? Then I went plant-based, which completely freaked everyone out. You can imagine they just about get over that. I mean, bearing in mind, this is like 6-7 years ago. They just about get over the fact that I'm not drinking. And then we go out to lunch. I don't drink, right? It was like a big moment. And then, the waiter comes around and says, what would you like to eat? And I'm like, have you got any vegan options? And the jaws would just like slam off the table. Be like, is this a joke? Right, first you're not drinking. Now you've gone vegan on us. Like, and that, again, this was 7 years ago before it all became sort of super trendy and whatnot. So yeah, it gives you the courage, right, to go against the grain. Because here's a big secret, right? The crowd have it wrong. Conventional wisdom on the whole is wrong. It leads people astray, right? Listen to the likes of Mark Twain. If you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. The crowd have it wrong. Look around at the unhappiness and the addictions, and the people are struggling on a mass scale because they're all following the same herd-like mentality, and they keep getting it wrong. All the fun stuff is by walking the other direction and having the courage to do something a bit different, right? And I've experienced it so many times in my life firsthand, and having trained literally hundreds of thousands of people, I can see it playing through day after day, where they come in for one change, they make this transformation, and then boom, it's the trigger where they go, oh, maybe I can challenge the way that I eat. Maybe I can challenge the way that I move my body, because that conventional wisdom that I've believed all of my life, that I need to eat loads of meat to be a man, for example, just not true for me anyway, if you know what I mean. So I think it's bigger than just the alcohol thing. It's having the courage to change that leads to this like plethora of like momentous progression and momentum in your life, which I think is stunning. That's why I do this. I do this for all the what next stuff. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, your passion comes through there, Andy, and that's, again, another point I like about your message. And one of the things you said there is around it being the trigger, or you could call it the domino effect, because what comes after it is all these huge benefits. For example, if we go into the fitness space, and exactly like you said, you shed that 3 stone of weight because you removed this elephant in the room, you removed this canary in the coal mine, whatever you want to talk about, that was preventing you from being consistent with your diet and nutrition. You moved to a plant-based diet, which it will inevitably have benefits for a lot of people, particularly those that have eaten kind of poorly previously. When you kind of flip the switch and you say, I'm going vegan, you make better conscious decisions around everything that you eat rather than just calorie total. And that's fantastic. And so many people listening to this will know that feeling of Monday to Thursday on a week. They are smashing it. They are nailing their nutrition. They're training every day. Their sessions are fantastic. They're getting to bed early. Friday, they go out with their friends for a drink. Friday to Sunday, their nutrition, their training is non-existent, and they make no progress. And sometimes that even spills into the Monday because it's been such a heavy one. And they go round and round in circles. So they're never going to shed that 3 stone. They're never going to achieve that workout time that they want to in CrossFit. They're never going to get that six-pack abs that they want for their holiday. They're never going to fit into that dress size that they've always dreamed of. It's a preventative thing that's sitting in the background that we don't want to talk about, but many of us are actually aware of it. So I guess it's one of the topics I want to go into on. Hopefully now people are accepting what you're saying, and it can be sometimes a tough pill to swallow, that alcohol might be the factor that's stopping you from reaching peak performance in your fitness. It might be stopping you reaching peak performance within the office, or it might be stopping you reaching peak performance even within your relationships. What are some of the pressures that are stopping us from doing it then? You spoke about sitting down to lunch with clients, wining and dining them. and them being shocked initially at the fact that you're not only plant-based, but also not willing to have that glass of red that you would normally have or more.
Yeah, I mean, there's unbelievable pressure. I mean, we did some research at One Beer, and we found out that, and we surveyed about 2,000 people, so it's a pretty big survey. It was unbelievable. I think around 87% said the number one reason that they don't take a break from alcohol more often is because of social pressure.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things, right? 85% said they felt pressured at work. There's this like underlying cultural pressure around alcohol that is the big problem. That's the problem, but no one really focuses on that. It's always like it's the individual's issue, if you know what I mean. But the truth is there is this huge, underlying pressure. And as human beings, social beings that we are, the thought of being thrown out or rejected from the tribe is unbelievably powerful, right? From a real like evolutionary primitive part of our makeup, we do not want to be thrown out of the tribe, right? Because historically that would have meant certain death. So we are like really like genetically programmed to want to remain part of the crowd. That's why, back to my point earlier, it's incredibly difficult to walk a different way. So we are swayed, and we can't underestimate the power of that influence, that social pressure to convince us to drink. I do a lot of work at corporates with the sort of the real, like the C-suite type team, and we talk about alcohol and whatnot in a corporate environment, right, which I've been involved in for many, many years. And I'm like, look, you have to look at this slightly differently. If you believe that your work drinks night is not unbelievably pressurized for your staff, then you don't understand psychology. It's simple. If you go to a works night and it's a drinks night, and the CEO and walks in and he has a pint, or she has a drink, or whatever it is, what message does that send to the C-suite? Well, the C-suite are thinking, I don't want to be thrown out of the tribe. I want to be part of the tribe. I don't want to lose my job. Guess what? I'm going to have a drink. Now all the C-suite are drinking. The CEO's drinking. What message does that send to the directors? Well, I don't want to be thrown out of the tribe. I don't want to lose my job. I'm going to have a drink. What message does that send? Right? So you end up in this completely ridiculous situation, right? Where you might have 100 people go to that drinks night. 50 of them probably don't want to drink. Maybe they've got a PT session in the morning. Maybe they've got to drive somewhere. But you end up in this ridiculous situation where 100% are almost drinking because of this social pressure that comes all the way down from the top. So it's a story that I tell them, if you can't see that, right, every time you put on one of these events, what messages are you sending, right? So you've got to start thinking differently, because the truth is people are pressured. So you've got people drinking when they don't want to drink. And beyond that, I'm like, what does that do to your performance in the office? Like, why would you do that? Doesn't make any sense. But, I'm going slightly off topic. But the key point is this: there's incredible social pressure. And I think it's higher when you're younger as well, in truth. And I think we've got to both own that. I'm 45 now. I started this when I was mid-30s. I was married. I had kids. So I was in a slightly different place. I totally get it. I think if you're young, single, it's even harder, in truth.
Yeah.
That being said, which is really exciting, the millennial generation, which, let's go up to like mid-20s, with that, on the whole, are drinking a lot less in terms of people being completely abstinent or just not drinking at all. So there's a new shift coming, right? I think you appreciate this. People are much more body aware, health aware, they're more conscious. So it feels like there's a bit of a shift starting to happen at that real younger age group, but there's still this sort of, if you're anywhere near 30, I think you're right in the mixer of, if you turn up to your mates, let's be honest and own it, and say, I'm not drinking, what's going to be said? You're going to get called every name under the sun as, you're this, you're that, don't be such a so-and-so, have a drink with me, don't be a lightweight, blah, blah. That's just the truth of it. And I think we have to own that. But that is starting to change now. And that's why I think having a challenge is great, saying that I'm just taking a break and it's only a short period is fantastic, right? Because then your drinking buddies think they're going to get you back in 28 days time. But the secret is this: if you're loving it, you'll have the confidence to keep going. So I think having a community, having a tribe, being inspired by people like yourself, myself, are out there now telling a different story around alcohol, I think that's incredibly important, because we can't underestimate how socially pressurized still it is to drink, which on the face of it makes no sense.
Firstly, within that, you speak about the corporate environment, and that's so true when you think about the different events that workplaces typically organize to bring staff together are alcohol centered. So straight away, like you said, they're starting off on that premise that people that turn up are going to have a drink. Now, the business that I'm at just now, the CEO of the corporate division, actually is alcohol free, and he
Legend.
and he's been alcohol free for 6 or 7 years, and he's fantastic at saying. So we sat down at a dinner in December last year, and he was at my table, and somebody drunkenly asked him, "Do you find it hard to network that you don't drink?" And he shot them daggers, and I wondered whether they were going to get the P45 there and then. But effectively, he said to them, one of the reasons that I actually benefit from networking sober is because I'm totally myself throughout this entire interaction. There's no additional fuel or stimulus to change my levels. And I'm more confident than ever before in this environment because I'm in complete control and I have complete confidence in how I'm going to deliver my elevator pitch to new people I meet. I'm going to be completely consummate and professional, and I can still be fun. And you will see that throughout the course of this night. And you did, because he was still dancing, he was still chatting away, he was still speaking to everyone, he was still a big part of the evening. And that was a great example to have. However, like you say, a lot of these events are organized and they are alcohol centered. And if the leadership all the way down, the pressure comes on, like you say, the C-suite to the senior management, then to the kind of day-to-day workers, there's pressure on you from above to adhere and be part of the tribe. And that's when you've also spoken about that element of a tribe within taking a challenge like the 1 year no beer or the 28-day break. You are able to have that support network around you to bounce things off, share challenges, speak about the pressure that you have on you. And equally, you speak about that social environment. Say you go around to your friend's house and everyone's going out on the Saturday night and you're the one that decides not to drink. I know that before I was fully comfortable with drinking a lot less than my friends do. I haven't drank since last October, so that's coming up for almost a year now. But before that, for 6 or 7 years, I probably drank 3 or 4 times, and it was typically for a birthday, my brother's birthday, and then on holiday in Ibiza or something like that, or Dubai. And I really limited it down. But around that, previous to that, when I didn't really want to drink, I would come up with all these mad excuses, Andy. I would come up with these ways that I would try and justify not drinking, rather than just saying I'm not drinking because I don't really want to. I would things like, oh, I've got this such and such, I've got an early start in the morning. Oh, I've brought the car tonight. But you brought the car because you don't want to drink. You've got a set of keys in your hand because you don't want to drink. And how many people get forced to ditch the car and have a drink? It's like a mission for your friends to try and get you to take enough, take a drink so you don't have to do that. And then it'd be all these other little things like, oh, I'm taking some antibiotics at the moment, so I can't drink. All these silly excuses that many of us use to justify not drinking before we're fully comfortable with not doing it, I guess. I don't know like what kind of things you see within your group and your tribe that people actually could use that be much stronger than that, because there'll be people listening that say, I've taken my car to pre-drinks before with my friends, and my idea has been that I'm not going to go to the club, I'm not going to drink, but 20 minutes in, I've got a vodka Diet Coke in my hand and I'm going out because the pressure on me has been such and my excuse has not been strong enough.
Yeah, I mean, this is an important topic as well. I mean, what has changed massively over the last 7-8 years, really, since I've been involved in this, are the alcohol-free alternatives and the alcohol-free movement. It's just huge now. When I started, there was one option, it was Beck's Blue. And back to your point, you know, in the early days, I was the same. You know, I was constantly having to make excuses to not drink, you know, to the point that I had a certain bar that I would go to and I had one of my special pints where they all knew what that meant. So I would just order, you know, whatever it is, 3 or 4 pints. Yeah. They knew to pour 2 Beck's Blue, which are alcohol-free, into a pint glass for me under the counter so that no one could see it. So I could stand there with a pint that no one could ever work out was alcohol-free. And that would buy me the cover to get through a night's drinking, right? Because once people see you drink a pint, they sort of take their eyes off the ball, as it were. I remember clearly sitting opposite a client pretending to drink wine, and it was a one-on-one over a full dinner. I didn't drink one sip of wine. I just kept putting it to my lips, putting it down, putting it to my lips, putting it down. And the waiter would come round and obviously looked like he was going to top up both glasses. Mine was always full, so he just didn't top the glass, you know, as sort of comical and silly as that. But it helped, right? It got me through those early days and weeks. So for people, even in those situations, if you feel like there's these little excuses you need to use them to get that momentum, to get that confidence. And then, like I said before, when you get on a roll with this thing and you feel amazing, you've got your time back and your mojo and your consistency and whatnot, then it becomes this easier to own it and go, do you know what? I'm not drinking. Like, why would I? Like, why would I drink? I don't want to feel like shit tomorrow. I've got a deadline coming up. I want to be smashing out the park tomorrow. I want to be ripped to pieces by the time I hit Ibiza. Like all of those things, right? These are important. And if you can sort of get into that mindset, then it becomes easier, because then you don't need to sort of fumble for excuses. You can just own it. And it is becoming easier to own it right now. It's definitely, every year that passes, it gets easier to turn around and say, I'm not drinking, because so many other people are doing it now. Whereas before it was all about, and you touched on this right at the start, there was two boxes. There was the I've got a problem box and everyone else box. That was it. You know, you either drunk, or if you didn't drink, meant you must have a problem, right? Because why wouldn't you drink? It's so great and amazing, blah, blah, blah. Right. Whereas now we've got this lovely middle ground starting to appear of people like myself and like yourself who are going, no, I'm just not going to drink. Like, why would I? I don't understand. Like, what's the point? It doesn't add any value to my life. But to come back on that, the alcohol-free alternatives. So this has made it so much easier now, because I drink those all the time. I drink more alcohol-free alternatives consistently than I ever did alcohol. And what I mean by that is almost every single evening, I'll have a nice bottle of alcohol-free beer. I never ever did that when I was drinking. I was a bit of an all or nothing. I was either on it in a big way or I wasn't on it. But they taste amazing, right? All the big guns are behind it. Your Heinekens are behind it. They're investing all this money into it. And if you actually look at the alcohol industry, there's only one area of growth. It's the alcohol-free part. So the point I'm making is it's so much easier to go out and socialize and do pre-drinks and all that sort of stuff. You just have to get really organized with it. You have to make sure that you've got your alcohol-free alternatives with you. So if you're arriving around someone's house, have your little 4-pack of alcohol-free beers, or a bottle of Seedlip, which is, you know, the world's first alcohol-free gin, and the mixers. So you can make those grown-up drinks. You can like hang out with everyone. You don't stand out massively from the crowd, right? You're still part of it. You can have the crack, you have the banter. You're sharp, like you said about the CEO, right? You've got your wits about you. You can crack the one-liners, right? Because you're not losing all that cognitive ability. And then people forget and they leave you alone. And it makes it so much easier. Whereas if you're standing there with like a glass of water or an orange juice, it's just so obvious. I think it creates more friction than needs to be. So the best way, I think, is to sort of blend in with the crowd with the alcohol-free alternatives. Just skip the alcohol bit. And another top tip, if the fun dries up, go home. You know, don't feel you have to be a hero, right? I felt like I had to be a hero. I'd find myself in nightclubs at 3:00 in the morning going, oh my God, this is the most horrific experience of my life. Right? Try going to a nightclub sober at 3:00 in the morning. It's not a nice experience, right? No one's having fun, let's be honest. Right? And I did that because I needed to prove that I could do it, you know, like to the world, and I could have fun. And then I got over myself and went, why am I doing that? It's not fun. I'm not going. Do you know what I mean? You have to start looking at things differently. And another thing, just while I'm on a roll, and I know for younger people, single people, it might be like, yeah, but how am I ever going to meet anyone? But the truth is this, right? How many times has the perfect person for you walked past and you've missed them in a fog of alcohol? How many times has that happened? You'll just never know, will you? Do you know what I mean? And I think by not drinking, it might open you up to all these new experiences and these new social settings that actually you might start to bump into new people that you find new relationships from, if you know what I mean.
I love those strategies, Andy. And I think the alcohol-free versions, having that in your hand will automatically reduce the number of challenges that you have significantly, which should make things easier straight away in terms of people coming up and saying, why aren't you drinking? Because if you've got a fizzy glass in your hand, people assume it's either a vodka mix or like you say, one of these non-alcoholic gins, or if you've got a pint in your hand, they assume it's a pint of lager or a pint of beer like they would be having. And that reduces the number of interactions and challenges you're going to have by number, which will make it easier straight away. And it gets you over that initial inertia of being able to have the confidence to say, I'm not drinking tonight because it's my decision. And equally, you spoke about that sharpness and being able to contribute and being part of the tribe. I think that from my own personal experience, I make a big effort to be not the class clown, because that's not what you want to be, but you want to be a contributor to the conversation and the environment, even when you're not drinking, because too many people, and this might trigger some people listening, are quite quiet in the office, but then they have a drink and they become like this loud mouth, like everything comes out that they would never say unless they have a few drinks in them. So I would never want to be that person that relies on alcohol to be forthright and outgoing and be that person that's a contributor to conversation and banter. So I always like to make sure, particularly if I go into, say I go to a party that I don't know that many people at and I'm not drinking, I make an effort to go around and speak to a lot of people and be confident and outgoing, which is fairly easy for myself, don't get me wrong, just given my personality type. But equally, you would never have somebody say like, oh, don't invite Colin, he won't drink, he'll be boring, because that can be a barrier that people maybe assume.
Yeah, and that's a key word you said, boring there, right? So this is the drinker's last stand, right? I do a lot of coaching, have done for years, right? And when you get someone to the point where you're interacting with them and they'll say something along the lines of, that's just the way it is, right? That means they've run out of these sort of excuses in their mind and they're close to a breakthrough. They're really close to a breakthrough. If you ever hear someone say, like, that's just the way, like they're clinging, they don't want to like change or, be open to this new idea, but it's almost there. It's the same with alcohol, right? No one on the planet can turn around and say alcohol is good for you. It's not. And I know they're the odd jumped up study, but if you actually unpeel those studies, right, they're always skewed in a massive way to make alcohol look better than it is, right? So it will never be healthy for you, ever in a billion years. It just won't be, right? They can't turn around and say it's going to give you more momentum. It's going to make you better at your job. It's going to optimize your performance. They just can't, right? There's nothing there. All they've got in the locker, right? All they've got is the boring tag. That's it. But it's really powerful, that one. It is powerful. It trips up so many people. Oh, don't be so bored. Oh, you're such a bore off, right? In it, that hurts, right? It's a real like attack on your identity. I don't know what it is about that word, but that one little line has tripped up so many people, but that's all they've got. That's the way I look at it. That's all they've got in their locker. And the truth is this, right? What is boring? Boring for me is talking absolute nonsense, repeating yourself, right? Saying things that you completely regret, forgetting about the whole night, being sick on your shoes, waking up on a Saturday morning, right? And you can't be bothered to move, being tired, inconsistent, unproductive, that's boring for me. I tell you what is exciting for me is being your authentic self, is showing up, is smiling, is being on it, is having the banter, jumping up on a Saturday morning full of beans, full of energy, getting out there and living life. That's what's exciting for me. That's the way I look at it in my mindset. And I think it's important to try and get into that. And I mentioned mindset there. It's a lot of what I do now. I do a lot of coaching, a lot of mindset work. Is because when you get into the right mindset around alcohol, that you're not giving anything up, you're gaining like just all of these amazing advantages, everything starts to change. Because I think too many people get caught in that trap. You've got dry Jan, for example, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
But people look at that and go, oh, it's a rubbish month. I'm going to lock myself away. I'll become a social hermit. Yep. It's going to be the most boring month in the history of boring months. And I can't wait to Feb and I can have a drink again and da-da, my world will be so exciting.
Andy,
that mindset.
I'm going to come in on dry January because
cool.
I completely agree, because if you do dry January and you abstain from everything that you enjoy, which maybe is alcohol, but it's also the social environments, going out and seeing your friends on a Friday and Saturday. And if you decide that in order to adhere to a month of no drinking at all, you lock yourself away, obviously it's going to be a shit month.
Exactly.
And you're not giving yourself a chance to see the benefits of being in social environments sober and still contribute and still enjoy yourself and still the next day bounce up. Because for me, the big thing is, if I'm working so hard in my work, like you were, not flogging yourself, but pushing yourself really hard, Monday, Friday, best believe Saturday and Sunday, I want to enjoy myself and unwind. I want to work on my other projects. I want to play golf. I want to watch football. I want to see my friends. I want to interact. I don't want to be wasting a day on the sofa watching Netflix with absolutely crippling with the fear and anxiety of what I might have said the night before to the girl that I'm trying to fire into. And that's a terrible situation to be in. So I really like the idea that your challenges and a lot of the other challenges that are out there for taking a break from alcohol, they aren't necessarily like a sober October or dry January where people are like ticking off the days that they've not had a drink, but removing themselves from all the fun stuff that they could actually do. So I appreciate that your challenge differs greatly from your traditional 30 days of no drinking / living in like a monk / hating every minute and can't wait to binge drink on the 1st of February with all your friends again.
Yeah, because then it just becomes, you just reaffirm the negative, if you know what I mean. Because you have a rubbish month and go, well, that was a rubbish month. I know it's going to be so much better when I drink. And you've missed the opportunity to learn, to try something new. It's just an experiment. That's what I say. Run the experiment. See what it looks like for you if you lose. I mean, I can tell you medically what it looked like for you. The largest ever study into a 28-day break from alcohol for normal drinkers, like middle lane drinkers, from a guy called Professor Kevin Moore. He was so astounded with the results of a 28-day break. This is in terms of your physiology, that he said pretty much, quote unquote, if the benefits were found in a pill form, everyone would want to take it and it would be worth billions. That was just a 28-day break from alcohol. On average, people lost 3 kilograms in weight, reduced their liver fat by about 40%, reduced their risk of type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancer, improved their cholesterol, their blood work. I mean, it was just staggering. That was just a 28-day break. And then layer on top of that all the wonderful psychological benefits like motivation and productivity and consistency. It's just an absolute no-brainer. So if you can get into that mindset and have that experience, as I said right at the start, everything changes. You don't need me then. You don't need someone to tell you. You've had that visceral experience of, oh, that's how I'm supposed to feel. I'm meant to be energized. I can still go out. I can still cut it with my friends. I can still hang out. I can still have the banter. I can still have the laugh, and I can still show up the following day. That's what it's all about. And then it leads to this sort of bigger self-development picture, which is basically what I'm all about now. I do lots of work, and maybe we can even talk about that briefly in the self-development world. I've just created what I'm terming, is probably quite not the first ever, but I think it's close to it, the first ever mind and body gym, which is launching in and around October. I've already got people in there at the moment, which is combining the two things, self-development and yoga, Pilates, strength training. It's all done online. I've got the likes of Christian Daly, former Scotland captain, West Ham captain, in there training with me. Basically, I'm bringing the best of the best into these groups, right? Because I want to develop myself ongoing. And I think there's so many people that come to this. They take a break from alcohol, for example. Then they're like, what next? You know, where can I go with this? How can I optimize myself? So I've created a community for people. I'm in there every day training people on the mindset. And then we layer in the body as well, because you'll know this as well from your background. Mind and body are one. It's the same thing. And I think we separate them too quickly when actually it is one and the same thing. So I always believe if you're training your body, you should be training your mind. If you're training your mind, you should be training your body. It is the same thing. So that's why I've set this all up. If anyone's interested in just why I want to roll with that, if you go to my website, you have to put the www in, andyramage.com, register for the newsletter, you'll get the announcement as when that gym opens. It's going to be super exclusive. I'm only going to let in about 200 people in there, and that's it. I'll cap it out, but we can talk about that again another time.
Yeah, that's epic, Andy. That'll be linked in the show notes, of course. And I think the beauty of what we've spoken about with regards to alcohol is we've not said that you need to give up drinking forever, but that you should do one of these challenges that's not a sober October, not a dry January, that's not this super restrictive in terms of social and shutting yourself away, but that once you see the benefits, you might consider prolonging that. I'm personally of the opinion that I'm not going to rule out having a drink again for a special occasion, but I would say once a year might actually be my limit, because how I feel the day after is not fantastic, and but importantly, on the plus side, how I feel 364 days of the year is fucking amazing, to be honest. I'm like, I'm bang on with respect to like being excited about life and contributing to my life. And I think one of the things that we maybe won't have time to touch on today, certainly, is around having that connection and purpose within your day-to-day life, which means that alcohol doesn't become something that you become reliant on to stimulate you on the weekends because you're unhappy with the rest of your existence. And I guess that's maybe something that you see within your groups as a common trend with regards to people having a kind of purpose or a focus outside of the drinking.
Yeah, I mean, even the research, I was looking at some of it this morning, there is a link between lack of meaning, for example, and addiction. Anyway, I think people turn to alcohol for plastic meaning. The world seems to make a bit more sense after a few drinks, only it doesn't when you wake up the next day and it feels 10 times worse. But I totally understand that. And I think the truth is, and we haven't really touched on this because we're talking about middle lane drinkers, but in truth, I think a lot of people turn to alcohol for a whole host of reasons, but mainly it's underlying pain. I don't mean physical pain, I mean psychological pain. They could be lonely, they could be bored with life, they could be lacking meaning and purpose,
Shy.
be in a unhappy marriage, socially really awkward, these type of things. So what happens with those? They sit underneath, right? And then we find this like elixir, which is alcohol, that seems to solve those problems, right? But ultimately it doesn't. It becomes the problem in itself. And what you're doing through that period is you're robbing yourself the opportunity to learn the skills, because all of these things are skills. You're robbing yourself of the opportunity to learn the skills that you need to deal with loneliness, to deal with boredom, to deal with any underlying anxieties or depressions or unhappy marriages, because you need to be proactive in those instances. Maybe it's counseling, maybe it's medication, maybe
Yeah.
it's a breakup, but those things need to be dealt with in the conscious light of, you know, your full cognitive ability, and not being bulldozed or pushed under the carpet all the time through alcohol. So there is that dual thing. So, you know, I think we have to own that as well. For some people, it's not just as easy as taking a break and da-da, they're all going to feel amazing, because there might need to be some work that needs to be done underneath. But the big
Yeah.
point around that is, maybe for the first time ever, you can actually see it for what it is. You can see what lies beneath, and then be proactive, because you've got your energy and your momentum about dealing with those things. And then you're unstoppable, because not only have you removed the alcohol out of your system and you're feeling amazing, you've actually dealt with that thing that's been tripping you up for the last, you know, 10 or 20 years. Then
Yeah.
you're unstoppable. So it's really important, whatever way you're coming at this from, just to take the break, right, and see what's there for you, and then do the work, and then you are unstoppable. Your alcohol-free superpowers will be unleashed on the world.
Yes, Andy, and that's a lovely note for us to wrap up on, in terms of, I think we've built a compelling case for somebody to consider taking a break from alcohol, taking part in one of these challenges, using the tribe and support network, understanding what life without drinking might look like, or what life with minimized or considerably downregulated drinking, a lot more choice, rather than doing it through habit and socialization and pressure, making a choice that I might want to drink on that occasion, but on these 5 other occasions, I don't need it. I don't want it.
Yeah.
I want to perform my best outside of that. We spoke about some of the resources. So your website, Andy, is there anywhere else you want to direct people? I know you've got your 28-day alcohol-free challenge book that was your first book, and you've got your second book out now as well.
Yeah, so the second book's called Let's Do This. It's all about motivation and the science behind motivation. It's a really practical book. So yeah, I'd highly recommend that if people are willing or into books. It's on Audible as well. I did record the Audible. That was a painful experience, by the way. But that's another story. Try reading your book word to word, especially if you've got a bit of an Essex twang going on, and trying to turn all your fuzz into thuzz is a mission, but that's another story. The website I mentioned, and then on socials, so Andy Ramage Official, Facebook, Instagram. I'm live on there every day, just giving it a bit of motivational action around 7:45 a.m. if anyone wants to come and join me on those.
Yep. That's superb, Andy. I'll link all of that in the show notes below. If you're still with us at this point, take a screenshot, pop it in your Instagram story, tag Andy, tag myself. I love the feedback that we get from these shows. And if this message really hits home with you, or you think it's something that you want to share with a friend who you think maybe you could be a challenge buddy with them to go on the break from alcohol with, share it with them on WhatsApp, iMessage. Let's get the message out there that taking a break from alcohol can open the door to a number of different opportunities. And it's not just for people that perhaps have a diagnosed addiction or a problem with alcohol. I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.